Hello, everybody. My name is Ratnos, and in the past few days, I've made a couple of tier list prediction videos where I talked about the specs that I thought were going to do well in high-end Raid and high-end Mythic Plus content this patch. But I realized in the shower a couple minutes ago that there was another factor of this that people often talk about, but is actually kind of cool to predict and quantify as well, which is how much can you bring the player and not the class in any given tier. And that's something that is really important, right? People always just say like, oh, play whatever's good, play whatever you want, right? Play whatever you have fun on. And that's often true. At the very top end, people just play whatever's good without regard for personal preference. And then as you get down from there, pretty quick it turns into a spot where it's like, hey, if you're good at a certain spec, just play that, right? If you prefer a certain spec, just play that and it'll probably be better. But the thing is, how much that's true actually changes from a given patch to a next one, right? So you have some tiers like Eternal Palace. If you weren't playing Holy Paladin and Discipline Priest, for example, in your raid comp there, you were really going to hurt on the last two bosses for it. Like, you would feel it really bad, even if you were in, World Top 2000 type rating, rather than just the World Top 10, where those sorts of really hyper-focused metagame stuff is often thought to mostly stay. Similarly, stuff like Fire Mage and Ny'alotha, pretty similar level of power, where it was like, oh, the world is a different place now that I have 3 Fire Mages in my raid group. But this tier, I actually don't think it's going to be like that as much, and I figured I would invent a new thing to put a prediction on this, because I think that's always interesting to do. So, without further ado, this is going to be a Microsoft Paint video. This is the bring the player, not the class-ometer. Bring the player, not the class-ometer. Alright, make that a little bigger. Drag it out. Not the class-ometer. Alright, perfect. So on the one end of this, you've got, this side, let's say, is full-on bring the class, right? And then on this side, you've got full-on bring the player. Or bring, just play whatever you want, right? That's what this is trying to say. Bring the player, not the class. If you're not familiar with that, that was a famous piece of WoW design philosophy from back in, the Wrath of the Lich King days. They wanted us to do that more. So for some reference, with those earlier stuff, I would say stuff like Eternal Palace healer situation. It was probably, over here. Yeah, Eternal Palace. This needs to be a smaller font. Okay. We'll do, yeah. Eternal Palace Healers was, kind of over here. Ny'alotha Fire Mage. We'll say that is, kind of here. Ny'alotha Fire. So where do I think things are going to land in this patch? Let me start by putting all of the specific categories that I think are going to be different on this thing. So first off, for raid buffs, if you're any spec that has a good raid buff, like Mage, Demon Hunter, whatever, the first copy of one of those, I think is still it's going to be, the amount of raid comps you see without a Mage, a DH, that kind of thing, it's going to be pretty rare, even pretty low down. So this will be 9.1 raid buffs. I would say that, in the top 100 or whatever world, you're going to see all the raid buffs represented in basically all the kills. And then maybe, one will be absent, right? You have these scuffed comps where, okay, we don't have a warrior, but, you feel it. But, guilds play it and get away with it, but you feel it. I've been in those situations quite often as well. But so that's kind of where I would define this line as. Then, pretty much everything else this coming patch, I think, is going to be pretty far on the other side. I think, especially for raid, so let's do another color that has no meaning. We'll send this over here. We're just 9.1 general use. Honestly, this could even be more slanted towards bring the player. In particular, I would say, let's see. Dude, all of these are class colors, so I can't avoid it seeming like I'm sending a coded message about a certain class or anything, but I promise I'm not. 9.1 tanks, I think, are going to be over here. For reference, in 9.0, at the start of the patch, tanks were mostly pretty good, but Vengeance Demon Hunter was a bit of an outlier, right? And now I think that they're basically all going to be really close. The only exception is going to be tanks are a good way to get raid buffs, right? So in some comps, people are going to feel some pressure to just play whatever tank brings the raid buff they need. But outside of that, I think that the balance on them is looking really good. And I think that that's just true for most of the roles as well. I would say healer's also pretty high up here, maybe a little bit of the role that's more towards bring the class than the general case. In Mythic Plus, I feel like a lot of the specs are actually going to be even better than in Raid. So in Raid, even the healers in particular in Mythic Plus, I would say probably more towards bring the player, whereas in Raid, more towards bring the class than this general line. So that's just a little bit of a new invention I've had here, the bring the player, not the classometer. We can use this, I will save this, and then we can use it to compare, how right I was about how much this actually does impact further down the rankings in like a heroic guild, in a low-end mythic progression guild, all that kind of stuff. I think it'll be interesting to look at, and also then this will give me a framework next patch where I can say whether I think things have moved in this direction or in this direction, right? But one hint that I think shows that I think we've moved pretty far in this, I would say, generally good direction of bring the player is the like empty D tier of this video, right? But I still think this is a useful thing to illustrate that like I don't think the S tier is miles ahead like it was with Nyloth of Fire, maybe Eternal Palace healers at the time. So there's a little fun video. It's a little, I guess, weird, but thought it'd be interesting to make. It was a shower thought, okay? I hope you liked it. Check out my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Ratnos. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.